The sky over Vorthar Prime burned with fire and smoke. Warships filled the clouds and explosions echoed through the valleys. Dust rose from the ground like fog as laser blasts tore through buildings, turning the once beautiful colony into a battlefield. Commander Elias Rourke stood on a rocky hill, staring at the battlefield below. His face was hard and his eyes were tired. He had fought many battles, but this one felt different. The Thalkor were not just attacking, they were trying to wipe humanity off the planet. Behind him, his squad waited. These were not the best soldiers, but they were brave. They were the last line of defense for Vorthar Prime. If they failed, the entire planet would fall. "Commander Rourke," said a young officer, running up to him. "Reinforcements aren't coming. We're on our—" Rourke didn't answer right away. He just nodded. "Then we hold this ground," he said, "or we die trying." As the team prepared for their mission, a new face joined them. A young scout named Kayla stepped forward. She had short black hair, sharp eyes, and moved with silent confidence. She didn't speak much, but something about her made people listen. When she did, "I'm assigned to your team, sir," she said. Rourke looked at her. "You're not from my unit." "No, sir. I was transferred here 2 days ago. Special recon." He nodded slowly. "Fine, stay sharp. We move in 10. Kayla joined the others, staying quiet. The soldiers joked and checked their gear, but Kayla sat alone, staring at the distant hills. She seemed to know something was coming. The mission was simple: destroy a Thalkor supply base hidden in the mountains. Without those supplies, the enemy's ground forces would slow down. It was a risky mission, but it had to be done. As the team moved through the rough terrain, Kayla led the way. She avoided traps and spotted Thalkor patrols before they got close. Rourke watched her with growing interest. "She's good," one soldier whispered. "Too good," another replied. But Rourke said nothing. He remembered something from long ago, something about a mission where he had made a choice to save a life instead of taking it. He shook the memory away. Now was not the time for the past. By nightfall, the team reached the edge of the Thalkor outpost. It was quiet, too quiet. Rourke signaled everyone to stop. Kayla crouched next to him. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "There are guards, but they're not moving like they should." "You think it's a trap?" "I think they're waiting." Rourke nodded. "Then we changed the plan." He sent half the team around the back, while the others prepared a distraction. Kayla stayed with Rourke. As the battle began, chaos exploded in the valley. Lights flashed, gunfire roared. Thalkor soldiers screamed in their strange, deep voices. Rourke's team fought hard, pushing through with grit and courage. During the fight, Kayla moved like a shadow. She took down enemies quickly and quietly, always protecting the team. Once she pulled a wounded soldier out of the line of fire. Another time she warned Rourke just in time to avoid a sniper's blast. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Rourke asked during a short break. Kayla only smiled faintly. "I've had practice." By dawn, the outpost was destroyed. The mission was a success. But as they made their way back to the base, Rourke couldn't stop thinking about Kayla. She was skilled, calm, and always one step ahead. And there was something in her eyes, something familiar. But he couldn't place it. The soldiers cheered their victory, but Kayla stayed quiet, looking toward the horizon. "Why do I feel like I've seen her before?" Rourke muttered to himself. He didn't know it yet, but the answer was buried deep in his past. A moment of mercy. A single choice that would come back in a way he could never imagine. Kayla glanced at him from a distance. Her face was calm, but her thoughts were racing. She remembered everything. He didn't recognize her. Not yet, but he would. The night after the mission was quiet. Too quiet. Commander Elias Rourke stood outside the outpost's bunker, watching the stars above Vorthar Prime. Most of his team was resting after the battle, but sleep didn't come easily for him anymore. Not after so many wars. Not with the weight of so many lives on his shoulders. He lit a small flare and watched the soft blue flame flicker. In its light, memories came flooding back, Images of burned cities, lost friends, and one mission that he never forgot. Years ago, on a jungle moon called Relkar 7, Rourke had led a raid against a Thalkor base. It had been a clean sweep, except for one moment. In the middle of the wreckage, he had found a young Thalkor child, wounded and crying. The orders were clear: no survivors. But Rourke had hesitated. The child hadn't attacked him. It had only looked at him, scared and small, and he had let it go. It was a moment he had buried deep in his mind, a secret. No one else knew, but something about Kayla's eyes, something about the way she had looked at him, stirred that memory again. Inside the bunker, Kayla sat in a corner, sharpening her blade slowly. The other soldiers were laughing and sharing stories, but she stayed quiet, always watching, always listening. She didn't seem tired. She didn't seem afraid. She seemed focused. Private Lynn, a younger soldier, sat beside her. "You saved my life out there," he said. "That sniper had me in his sights." Kayla gave a small smile. "You would have done the same." "I don't know," Lynn said. "You move like you were born for this." She paused. "Maybe I was." Lynn looked at her with a puzzled face, but Kayla said no more. The next day, Rourke called for a scouting mission. Reports said a Thalkor ship had crashed nearby. It might carry weapons or, worse, reinforcements. Rourke chose a small team. Kayla was on it, of course. He wanted to keep an eye on her. The crash site was in a burned-out forest. Black trees stood like skeletons, and ash covered the ground like snow. The ship was torn open, metal pieces scattered everywhere. "It's too quiet again," Kayla said, crouching low. "You keep saying that," Rourke replied, scanning the wreckage. "Because it keeps being true." They moved carefully through the wreck, checking for signs of life. That's when Kayla found it. An old Thalkor data core half buried under metal. She picked it up and turned it over with gentle fingers. "You recognize it?" Rourke asked. She hesitated. "Only by design. Thalkor tech is predictable." He narrowed his eyes. "You know a lot about the enemy." She met his gaze. "We all study the enemy, don't we?" Rourke didn't answer. Something about her voice made the hairs on his neck stand up. There was a story behind her words, but she wasn't ready to tell it. That night, Rourke sat alone in his quarters, staring at the data core. He knew Kayla had held it differently than a soldier should, not with fear or confusion, but with familiarity. He pulled up her records on a small screen. The file was clean, too clean. No childhood history, no home colony, just classified, special assignment. Someone had erased her past, or never wrote it down at all. Elsewhere, Kayla stood by a small fire outside the base. She held a thin strip of cloth in her hands. It was dark purple, worn and torn at the edges. It was the only thing she had from before, the only piece of her life as a child. She remembered the flames of Relkar 7, the screams, the soldiers, and one man who had spared her life. He had pointed his weapon at her and then lowered it. Rourke. She knew his face the moment she saw him. Older now, scarred, but still the same eyes, the same hesitation, the same strength. She had joined the human side years later, not by force, not by trickery, but by choice. Her own people had abandoned her, but Rourke's mercy had given her a new path. Now she protected him, not because she owed him, but because he had given her something no one else did, a chance. Back in the command center, alarms suddenly blared. "Incoming Thalkor scouts, North Ridge," shouted a guard. Rourke grabbed his rifle. "Get everyone ready. This isn't over." As the soldiers scrambled to their positions, Kayla stood already in gear, ready before the others. Rourke noticed. "You always seem to know when trouble's coming," he said. She looked at him calmly. "Because trouble is always coming." Rourke studied her face, the cool calm, the unreadable eyes. He didn't know the full truth yet, but soon he would. The morning sun burned away the last wisps of night fog over the jagged canyons of Vorthar Prime. Commander Elias Rourke's team moved cautiously through the rocky paths, eyes sharp for any sign of the Thalcor. "Stay close," Rourke ordered. His voice was steady, but inside he felt a rising tension. The last attack had come too easily. That always meant a trap. Kayla led the way. She moved silently, like a shadow blending with the stones. Her sharp gaze scanned every ridge, every crevice. "Scouts ahead," she whispered suddenly, raising her hand. Rourke and the others froze. Far down the canyon, small movements caught the sunlight. Fast, sharp figures patrolling. But they didn't behave like normal soldiers. They were too still, too patient, like hunters waiting for prey. "They're lying in wait," Kayla said. "We need a new plan." Rourke nodded. "Split into 2 groups. Lynn, you and your team take the East Ridge. Kayla, you're with me. We circle around to the west. Move fast. Keep quiet." The team broke apart, tension thick in the air. The rocky walls echoed with distant sounds of the planet's wild creatures, but the soldiers knew the real danger was closer. As they moved, Kayla suddenly stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait," she said, crouching behind a boulder. "What is it?" Rourke asked, stepping beside her. She pointed to small marks on the ground and broken branches, disturbed dirt. "They've set traps here. Hidden mines, probably. We can't rush in blindly." Rourke glanced carefully. He had seen enough battlefields to trust her instincts. "Good catch," he said. "We'll move around." They changed course, edging around the traps. The path grew steeper and narrower. Rourke felt the weight of the mission pressing harder. Then, without warning, a sharp explosion rocked the canyon wall. Dust and rocks rained down as a hidden mine blew up nearby. Soldiers shouted and scrambled for cover. "Minefield!" Kayla shouted, diving to protect Rourke as another blast sent dirt flying over them. The team was trapped. From the other side of the canyon, a strange loud sound echoed, the high-pitched war cry of the Thalcor. "They're closing in," Rourke shouted. "Form up, we fight here!" Kayla's eyes burned with determination. She moved with fierce speed, picking off enemy scouts as they tried to sneak closer. "Cover me," she called to Lynn's team. The firefight was brutal and fast. The Thalcor soldiers were relentless, their weapons strange but deadly. Bullets zipped past, and explosions lit the rocky canyon in flashes of red and orange. Despite the chaos, Kayla stayed calm. She seemed to know every move the enemy would make before they made it. She led counterattacks that saved her team more than once, but the enemy's numbers were too many. Rourke found himself cornered on a narrow ledge, with a Thalcor soldier aiming a deadly weapon at him. A Kavos arrow, a biotech projectile, designed to track its target and explode on impact. Just as the arrow fired, Kayla leapt forward. Without hesitation, she threw herself between Rourke and the deadly missile. The arrow struck her side. She gasped, pain flashing across her face, but she stayed standing, holding Rourke back. He reached out, but she shook her head. "Listen to me," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. "You once spared a child. That child was me." Rourke's eyes widened in shock. He barely heard the words over the roar of battle, but they cut through everything else. "Kayla," he shouted. Trying to support her, she gave a small, tired smile. "It's why I'm here. To protect you. Always." The pain made her knees wobble, but she stayed upright, buying precious seconds for Rourke to escape. Rourke gritted his teeth and fired back at the enemy, using the moment Kayla gave him. He led the team in a desperate push, forcing the Thalcor to retreat. The arrow had wounded Kayla badly, but she was alive. The medics rushed to her side, and Rourke stayed close. As she lay on a stretcher, pale but breathing, Rourke kept his eyes on her. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. Kayla looked at him, strength fading but her eyes steady. "The child you spared? I am her." And with those words, a new story began. The medics worked quickly under the harsh lights of the makeshift infirmary. Kayla lay on a narrow bed, her breath shallow but steady. The wound in her side was deep, an arrow made of strange, glowing metal, coated with deadly biotech that burned like fire. Commander Elias Rourke stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching with a mix of worry and disbelief. His mind was racing. The words Kayla had whispered moments before echoed in his ears. You once spared a child. That child was me. How could this be? The child he had spared all those years ago during a battle he barely remembered. It seemed impossible. Yet the truth in her eyes told him otherwise. Rourke sat down beside Kayla, reaching out to hold her hand. Her skin was cool, but her grip was firm. Tell me everything, he said softly. Kayla struggled to speak but found her voice. I was that child, on Relkar 7. You spared me when you had every reason to kill me. Rourke nodded slowly. I remember, just a little. I was taken by rebels after that, she continued. They changed me, altered my body and mind. I learned their ways, their weapons, their secrets. But I never forgot you. Rourke's mind filled with questions. Why come to us now? Why risk everything? Kayla looked at him with a mix of sadness and hope. Because I owe you. Because I believe in what humanity stands for. Mercy, strength, hope. Outside the infirmary, the battle raged on. The Thalkor forces were regrouping for another attack. The enemy was ruthless, relentless, but so was humanity's will to survive. Rourke stood, determination hardening his features. We can't lose here, not after everything. He turned to his officers. Prepare the defenses. Kayla's intel gave us an edge. We know their tactics now. The soldiers moved with renewed energy, inspired by Kayla's sacrifice and story. She had become more than a scout. She was a symbol of something greater. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the battlefield, Rourke found a moment alone with Kayla. Her wound was serious, but she smiled weakly. You saved me once, she said. Now I want to save you. He squeezed her hand gently. You already have. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Suddenly, alarms blared. The Thalkor launched a massive assault. War machines rolled across the landscape, and the sky filled with enemy ships. Rourke barked orders. Hold the line, protect the base at all costs. Kayla, despite her pain, insisted on joining the fight. I know their weaknesses, she said. Let me help. Rourke hesitated but saw the fire in her eyes. All right, but be careful. Together, they led the soldiers into battle. Kayla's knowledge of the enemy's technology turned the tide. She directed strikes to key targets, disabling enemy weapons and opening paths for their forces. The fight was brutal. Many lives were lost, but slowly, the Thalkor began to retreat. After the battle, Rourke and Kayla stood on the hill overlooking the battlefield. The stars were bright now, shining over a world scarred but still alive. Thank you, Rourke said quietly. For everything. Kayla smiled. No, thank you. For showing mercy when it mattered. In that moment, a new bond was forged, not just between two warriors, but between two paths intertwined by fate and choice. The quiet hum of the infirmary was broken only by the soft beep of machines monitoring Kayla's heart. Her wound was healing, but her body was still weak. Commander Elias Rourke sat nearby, restless and thoughtful. He kept turning over her words in his mind. You once spared a child? That child was me. How could a child he had saved years ago appear here now, in the middle of this war, and fight alongside him? Kayla's breathing was steady, and when she opened her eyes, she found Rourke watching her closely. You're awake, he said softly. She nodded. It's time I told you everything. The truth. Kayla's voice was quiet but clear as she began. After the battle on Relkar 7, I was found by rebel scientists. They took me from my home and changed me. They gave me new skills, strength, speed, knowledge of your enemies. Rourke listened, remembering the moment years ago when he chose mercy over orders. He never thought that decision would lead to this. They trained me to be a soldier, to be a weapon, Kayla continued, but I never forgot the man who spared me. That act of kindness gave me hope when all I knew was pain. Rourke reached out and took her hand. Why come back now? He asked. Because I believe in what you stand for. Humanity's strength is not just in weapons or numbers, but in compassion. I wanted to repay that mercy, to fight for a future where children like me can live free. The days passed slowly as Kayla recovered. Outside the infirmary, the war continued. The Thalkor were strong, but so was the human spirit. Rourke found himself thinking more and more about the child he had spared, the child who had grown into this brave warrior. She was a living reminder of the power of mercy. One afternoon, Kayla's strength returned enough for her to walk. Rourke helped her outside, where the sun warmed the scarred earth. Are you ready to fight again? He asked. Kayla smiled. I've never been more ready. They gathered with the soldiers in the command tent. Kayla shared everything she had learned during her time with the rebels, the enemy's tactics, weaknesses, and secrets. We can use this, Rourke said, studying the maps. Their supply lines are weak near the northern ridge. If we cut them off, we can stop their attacks. Kayla nodded. But we must move quickly, the Thalkor won't wait. The mission was dangerous, but the team was determined. Kayla led the way, guiding the soldiers through hidden paths and avoiding enemy patrols. Her knowledge saved lives at every turn. As they approached the northern ridge, Rourke felt a renewed hope. For the first time in a long while, he believed, they could win. The battle that followed was fierce. The Thalkor fought with desperation, but Kayla's tactics and the soldiers' courage made the difference. They cut off the supply lines and pushed the enemy back. After the fight, Rourke and Kayla stood looking at the horizon. You saved more than just me, Kayla said softly. You saved a future. Rourke nodded. And you gave me a reason to keep fighting. They stood together, two warriors bound by fate and mercy, ready to face whatever came next. The air was heavy with smoke and dust as the sun rose over the battlefield of Vorthar Prime. Commander Elias Rourke stood among his soldiers, their faces tired but determined. The war with the Thalkor had reached a turning point, and this battle could decide the fate of the colony. Kayla stood beside Rourke, her strength returning day by day. Though her wound still pained her, her mind was sharp and her spirit unbroken. She had become more than a scout. She was a symbol of hope. We strike at dawn, Rourke announced to the assembled troops. This is our chance to break their hold and push them back. The soldiers nodded, their resolve clear. Many had heard Kayla's story. How she was, once the enemy's child saved by Rourke's mercy. Now she was fighting for humanity with every breath. As night fell, Kayla and Rourke reviewed the battle plans. Using Kayla's knowledge of Thalkor technology and tactics, they devised a strategy to attack the enemy's command center. Their defenses are strong, Kayla warned. But if we disable their communication link, we cut off their reinforcements. Rourke agreed. It's risky, but it's our best shot. Before the mission, Kayla took a moment to speak privately with Rourke. Thank you, she said softly, for the chance you gave me all those years ago. I won't let you down. Rourke smiled, feeling a deep respect for the young woman she had become. You've already done more than I ever expected. The next morning, under the cover of dawn, the team moved silently through the rocky terrain. Kayla led the way, her senses alert for danger. They approached the Thalkor Command Center, a massive structure of dark metal, guarded by heavily armed soldiers and automated defenses. Kayla signaled for a small group to flank the enemy while Rourke led the main force. The plan was to strike quickly and hard. The battle was fierce and intense. Explosions shook the ground, and laser fire lit the dark sky. The Thalkor fought fiercely, but the human soldiers pressed forward with determination. Kayla's team disabled the communication towers, cutting off enemy signals. With the command center isolated, confusion spread among the Thalkor ranks. Rourke and his squad fought their way into the heart of the enemy base. Every step was a struggle, but they pushed on. In the final moments of the battle, Kayla faced a group of enemy soldiers blocking their path. She fought with skill and bravery, her movements precise and strong. One Thalkor warrior aimed a deadly weapon at Rourke. Without hesitation, Kayla stepped in front of him, blocking the attack. The enemy fell, but Kayla was left breathless. Rourke reached her side quickly. "Are you all right?" She nodded, catching her breath. "I'll be fine." With the command, center captured, the Thalkor forces began to retreat. The human soldiers cheered, knowing this victory was a turning point. Rourke looked around at his team, wounded but alive, proud and ready for what came next. He turned to Kayla, his voice firm. "This is just the beginning. We'll keep fighting until peace returns." Kayla smiled. "And we'll win it together." As the sun set on Vorthar Prime, hope burned bright in the hearts of humanity. The battle had been won, but the war was not over. Yet with courage, mercy, and unity, they would face whatever came next. The morning sun rose slowly over the battered but proud colony of Vorthar Prime. The battle was over, and for the first time in many years, a calm settled across the land. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out over the recovering city. Buildings that had been damaged were being rebuilt. Soldiers and civilians worked side by side to clear debris and plant new trees. Beside him, Kayla stood tall and strong, though her scars were still visible. She wore the uniform of a hero, but more than that, she carried the hope of a future built on mercy and courage. "Do you think they will come back?" Kayla asked quietly. Rourke looked at her and smiled. "Maybe. But this time, we are ready." He paused and then said, "You know, I never thought the child I spared all those years ago would grow up to be the reason we still stand here today." Kayla smiled softly. "And I never thought a single act of kindness could change everything." Inside the command center, soldiers gathered for a ceremony. Rourke stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. "Today we honor the bravery of those who fought for this planet, those who stood when others fell. We honor Kayla, who reminded us that mercy can be the greatest strength." Kayla stepped forward, her heart full but steady. "I am proud to stand with humanity," she said. "Not because of what I was, but because of what we can become, together." The crowd erupted in cheers. For the first time, peace felt possible. Later, as the stars began to shine, Rourke and Kayla walked through the quiet streets. "Will you stay?" he asked. Kayla looked up at the sky. "I will. This is my home now." Rourke nodded. "Then let's build something better, not just for us, but for all who come after." The war had tested them all, but it had also shown the strength of humanity's heart. Kayla's story was no longer just hers. It was a symbol of hope and unity. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it was bright. And on Vorthar Prime, a new dawn had begun.